Marina Caldwell's heels clicked sharply against the marble floor of the grand ballroom, each step echoing like a countdown she hadn't asked for. She felt every eye in the room linger on her, some curious, most judgmental, as Richard Halston, her ex-husband, raised his glass to the crowd beside his new bride, Lila Summers. The whispers were a chorus of mockery she couldn't escape. "Look at Marina," someone murmured near the champagne fountain. "She always aimed high, and now, she's just here." She clenched her fingers around her purse, nails digging into the leather, tasting the sting of humiliation. The velvet gown she had spent weeks choosing now felt like a cage. Marina could almost hear the laughter bouncing off the gilded walls, each joke Richard made at her expense slicing through her like paper. Richard's voice rang over the murmur of guests, smooth and confident, as if the world had been made for him alone. "To new beginnings," he toasted, eyes gleaming with a mixture of pride and cruelty. "And to finally leaving behind those who doubted me. I mean, look at Marina always reaching for the stars, yet somehow missing the mark." Lila's delicate laugh joined his, light but sharp, the kind of sound that made Marina's chest tighten with remembered regrets and battles lost in silence. Her face forced a polite smile, one that didn't reach the eyes burning with a mixture of shame and disbelief. She had loved, trusted, and sacrificed, yet here she was, displayed as an accessory to their triumph, a cautionary tale of ambition gone unfulfilled. Yet, even amidst the embarrassment, a quiet part of her refused to break. Marina had always known that life could twist in unpredictable ways, and though the room now seemed to close in, she forced herself to breathe, counting the seconds as if they were talismans. Just days before, she had felt ordinary, unremarkable in the corporate world, quietly grinding away at her modest office in the city's downtown towers. Her relationship with Richard had ended badly, but she had imagined she could step forward, untarnished by the past. That illusion shattered tonight under the chandeliers, amidst crystal glasses and whispered jabs. As she slipped out to the balcony, the cool night air brushing against her cheeks, she let herself shiver not from cold, but from the raw edge of vulnerability. Then the call came. Marina's phone buzzed with an unknown number. She answered hesitantly, curiosity overpowering any lingering irritation. "Marina Caldwell?" A voice asked, calm and authoritative. "This is from Blackwood Enterprises. I'm calling regarding a matter of extreme urgency and confidentiality. It concerns the late Silas Blackwood's estate." Her pulse skipped. Blackwood, the name had lingered at the edges of her career, a titan whose fortune and influence were legendary. She had met him only briefly at corporate events, never imagining she would have more than a passing handshake or a shared toast. Yet the next words carved a space in her chest she didn't know existed. "You are the sole heir to Mr. Blackwood's $75 billion estate," the voice continued. "All documents have been finalized. You will be notified about the official transfer and responsibilities." Marina dropped her phone, staring at the balcony floor as if the moonlit cityscape could explain this miraculous turn. The days that followed blurred. Marina moved through a haze of legal briefings, press statements, and shockwaves from Blackwood Industries Board. Executives who had once barely acknowledged her were now deferential, curious, calculating. Calls flooded in from distant relatives of the late magnate, each more incredulous than the last, questioning how a woman they scarcely knew could inherit such immense wealth. Marina met each with quiet patience, her mind racing through numbers, responsibilities, and ethical questions she had never prepared to face. At night, she found herself wandering through Silas Blackwood's empty offices, imagining him seated behind the great mahogany desk, weighing each decision with meticulous care. She felt a strange intimacy with someone she barely knew, guided now by the trust he had placed in her. Even in the whirlwind, Marina felt a budding sense of empowerment. The humiliation of Richard's wedding still lingered, a bitter note in her chest, but it no longer defined her. She discovered a new steadiness in her steps, an elegance rooted not in gowns or appearances, but in the knowledge that she now wielded influence, opportunity, and choice. Every email answered, every board meeting attended, was a brick in the foundation of her new life. As Marina stood on the balcony once more, Looking out at the city that had once seemed vast and intimidating, she whispered to herself, "This is just the beginning." There was uncertainty, yes, but also a thrill that surged through her, an invitation to rewrite the story that Richard had once believed he controlled. Marina returned to her apartment that evening, the city lights reflecting in her eyes, a soft, determined smile playing at her lips. She thought of Richard and Lila, of their empty boasts and shallow celebrations, and felt neither bitterness nor vengeance, not yet. Instead, she felt clarity, an unshakable understanding that life had a strange, sometimes poetic way of balancing scales. Her hands trembled only slightly as she signed the preliminary documents for Blackwood Industries, an ordinary act made extraordinary by the power it now represented. She had inherited not just wealth, but responsibility, legacy, and a platform for change. And for the first time in years, Marina Caldwell felt truly untouchable, not because she wielded riches, but because she had finally reclaimed herself. The night deepened, wrapping the city in quiet anticipation. Marina allowed herself a single laugh, soft and private, the kind that begins at the throat and lingers like a secret. "Remember when Aunt Mabel tried to bake cookies at midnight?" she murmured aloud, letting the memory of simpler, warmer times mingle with the dizzying reality of her new life. The balcony seemed to stretch infinitely, the skyline a promise rather than a challenge. She was no longer the woman diminished at a wedding, no longer defined by Richard's judgments or Lila's laughter. She was an heiress, a leader, and a force quietly gathering strength. And as Marina Caldwell looked toward the horizon, she realized that for the first time, she could imagine the life she had always deserved, powerful, independent, and entirely her own. Marina Caldwell stepped into the towering headquarters of Blackwood Industries with a calm that belied the storm brewing beneath the surface. The executives, many of whom had questioned her competence even before she signed the inheritance documents, watched her every movement, calculating and curious. Some greeted her with cautious respect, others offered thinly veiled skepticism. She could sense the tension thickening the air, as if her very presence challenged decades of established hierarchies. For Marina, the weight of the $75 billion empire was both exhilarating and daunting. Every decision carried consequences, yet she felt alive in a way she never had during years of playing small, letting Richard Halston dictate not only her marriage but her confidence. Richard's financial missteps began to surface almost immediately. His construction company, once touted as a growing empire, was discovered to be deeply in debt to one of Blackwood's subsidiaries. The irony was not lost on Marina. She drafted a letter giving him 30 days to resolve the debt, formal yet composed, offering the standard time frame any company would expect. When the notice reached him, Richard's face had paled in disbelief, his arrogance replaced by an unfamiliar tension. The man who had paraded his wealth and mocked her ambition now faced the very scrutiny and pressure that came naturally to Marina. She watched quietly as the dominoes of his careless spending, failed contracts, and mounting liabilities began to tumble. Meanwhile, at Blackwood Industries, Marina encountered the subtle resistance of employees and board members who doubted her ability to lead. Some whispered about her lack of corporate experience. Others attempted to sway her with misleading reports and suggestions that served their own interests. Marina navigated the politics with a measured patience, absorbing each challenge as a lesson in leadership. She discovered a reservoir of strategic thinking she had never fully tapped, a talent for negotiation and problem-solving honed during years of quiet perseverance. Decisions that once seemed intimidating, mergers, acquisitions, charitable expansions, became opportunities for her to assert authority and vision. She transformed skepticism into collaboration, listening carefully to those who spoke with integrity while cutting through those who thrived on manipulation. The pressure on Richard intensified. Lila, once enchanted by the trappings of his supposed success, began to question the lifestyle she had married into. The bills accumulated, the public reputation waned, and Richard's confrontations with Marina became more desperate. "You're trying to ruin me," he accused one afternoon during a tense phone call, his voice sharp and unsteady. Marina's response was calm, almost gentle. "I am not responsible for your decisions, Richard. Your choices led you here. I merely ensure that the obligations you accepted are met." There was no malice in her words, only the quiet force of someone who understood the power of accountability. For the first time, Richard confronted the consequences of his reckless financial decisions and poor planning. Lila, observing the unraveling, felt the strain in her own position, her confidence in their union beginning to falter. Marina also took the opportunity to reshape the legacy of Blackwood Industries. She expanded charitable initiatives, established community programs, and invested in sustainable projects that reflected a commitment beyond profit. The Blackwood name, once associated primarily with wealth and influence, began to signify responsibility, innovation, and positive societal impact. Board meetings that had once been arenas of intimidation became collaborative spaces under Marina's guidance. She relied on instinct, counsel from trusted advisors, and a principled approach to decision-making. Each success strengthened her resolve. Each obstacle became a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block. Her own sense of identity deepened, a contrast to the years spent defined by Richard's shadow. As weeks turned into months, Richard's financial situation worsened. The construction projects he had boasted about stalled, debts mounted, and investor confidence evaporated. He confronted Marina again, this time in person, his expression a mixture of frustration, disbelief, and fear. "Why are you doing this to me?" he demanded, the bravado of their wedding day entirely absent. Marina looked at him steadily. "I am not doing anything to you, Richard. The law and the contracts are doing their work. I simply step into the position entrusted to me, ensuring that obligations are honored. This is your own making." She felt no satisfaction in his collapse, only a solemn recognition that power and responsibility are inseparable. Lila, witnessing the unraveling, quietly began to distance herself, doubting whether their marriage could withstand the mounting pressures. Amid the turmoil, Marina discovered an unexpected sense of liberation. The inheritance was not merely about wealth. It was an affirmation of her capabilities, a validation of a life she had long doubted. She began to mentor younger employees, fostered innovation in company projects, and championed ethical business practices that earned the respect of both staff and industry peers. Richard's mismanagement served as a stark mirror, a reminder that pride and recklessness can undo even the most carefully constructed facades. Lila's growing uncertainty compounded his sense of loss, as the life they had envisioned together began to crumble under the weight of truth and accountability. As the 30-day deadline expired, Richard failed to meet the obligations, and Marina enforced the necessary legal actions, closing gaps in his financial safety nets and absorbing remaining risk strategically within Blackwood Industries. His empire teetered, his public reputation tarnished, and his personal relationships strained. The contrast between their positions was stark. Marina, once humiliated, now commanded influence, respect, and control. Richard, once boastful and dismissive, confronted the consequences of negligence and poor judgment. Marina felt a quiet vindication but remained composed, knowing that her strength lay in her foresight, discipline, and ethical approach rather than in schadenfreude. The months that followed revealed subtle shifts in the corporate landscape. Blackwood Industries flourished under Marina's guidance. New partnerships and acquisitions strengthened the company's position, and her philanthropic endeavors fostered loyalty among employees and the public alike. Richard, increasingly isolated and constrained by debt, became a cautionary tale whispered about in industry circles. Lila eventually left, unable to reconcile their faltering marriage with the reality of Richard's downfall. Marina, observing these shifts, recognized a profound truth. Success is not simply inherited or won through audacity alone. It is cultivated through patience, strategy, empathy, and an unwavering commitment to principles. Through it all, Marina Caldwell transformed not just the companies under her care, but her own sense of self. The echoes of public humiliation faded, replaced by a quiet confidence that radiated through boardrooms, charity events, and private reflections. Richard's confrontations became relics of the past, lessons etched into the narrative of her rise. Lila's departure was a final punctuation mark on a chapter that had once seemed unchangeable. Marina understood now that true power was not in wealth alone, but in resilience, clarity, and the courage to lead with integrity. And in every strategic decision, every careful negotiation, and every step forward, Marina Caldwell reclaimed the dignity and autonomy that had been denied to her for far too long. Marina Caldwell's mornings now began with the soft light of sunrise spilling across her penthouse office, the city beneath her a canvas of possibility rather than challenge. Blackwood Industries thrived under her leadership, a testament not only to inherited wealth but to vision, intelligence, and integrity. Every board meeting, every new initiative reflected careful planning and thoughtful execution, a far cry from the chaotic, reckless management she had witnessed from Richard Halston. She had transformed the company into a force for good as well as profit, with charitable programs expanding across communities that had never before felt the reach of Blackwood's influence. Marina had become a figure of inspiration, respected, admired, and quietly formidable. Richard's world, in stark contrast, crumbled. The construction empire he had once flaunted was now in shambles. Lila, disillusioned and frustrated by his inability to navigate financial realities, had left him, taking what dignity she could salvage and leaving behind the hollow echoes of their marriage. Richard confronted Marina one last time, his tone a mixture of desperation and disbelief. "You've ruined everything I built," he said, voice strained, eyes darting for a reaction she would never give. Marina's reply was measured, calm, and almost gentle. "I have not ruined you, Richard. You did that yourself. I simply stepped in to honor what was entrusted to me. Responsibility isn't a punishment, it's an opportunity. Learn from it." She watched him leave, understanding finally that closure comes not from revenge, but from reclaiming one's own life. Amid the upheaval, Marina found love in the most unexpected of places. Thomas Chun, an architect she had met during a Blackwood community initiative, possessed a quiet intelligence and a grounded perspective that complemented her strategic mind. Their connection grew naturally, not rushed, built on mutual respect, shared values, and an appreciation for life's complexities. Marina discovered that love did not have to be entangled with control or ego, that a partnership could be nurturing rather than competitive. Together, they toured construction sites, planned charitable expansions, and shared quiet evenings discussing visions for the city's future. With Thomas, Marina felt a balance she had never known. With Richard, a partnership rooted in equality, understanding, and gentle encouragement. The Blackwood Community Center became the crown jewel of Marina's philanthropic vision. She presided over the dedication ceremony with grace and humility, the building a symbol of progress, hope, and empowerment. Children laughed in the newly painted halls, volunteers coordinated programs with efficiency and warmth, and Marina felt a profound sense of purpose. It was not the wealth she had inherited that mattered most, nor the downfall of Richard. It was the tangible impact she could create, the opportunity to give back and redefine what it meant to wield influence responsibly. She spoke to the gathered community, her voice steady yet warm. "This center is for all of you," she said, eyes scanning the crowd. "A place where potential is nurtured, dreams are encouraged, and every action matters." Richard faded from her life quietly. His empire, personal relationships, and social standing diminished under the weight of his own mismanagement. Meanwhile, Marina flourished, balancing corporate success with meaningful social impact and a personal life enriched by genuine connection. She understood the poetic symmetry of her journey. Once mocked, diminished, and humiliated, she now stood empowered, respected, and fulfilled. Every challenge Richard had created became a lesson in resilience. Every misstep of the past a stepping stone for her growth. Marina Caldwell had transformed not only Blackwood Industries, but herself, emerging from betrayal and public humiliation as a leader, philanthropist, and visionary who had reclaimed her narrative and reshaped it on her own terms. A year later, Marina stood at the community center with Thomas at her side, reflecting on a journey that had seemed impossible months earlier. The city's skyline shimmered in the golden light, a reminder of both fragility and opportunity. She thought of Richard and Lila only briefly, their shadows fading as her focus remained on what she could build, nurture, and inspire. The lessons she had learned, the value of patience, the power of accountability, and the transformative potential of kindness guided every decision, every conversation, every plan for the future. Marina smiled, turning to Thomas with quiet gratitude. "We've got this," she said softly, the phrase now carrying weight far beyond words, a mantra of resilience, love, and growth. The empire she now commanded was not just a measure of wealth, but of integrity, vision, and the enduring power of reclaiming one's life. Moral lesson. Marina's journey reminds us that life's hardships often conceal unexpected blessings. Humiliation, betrayal, and loss can transform into wisdom, strength, and opportunity when met with patience and integrity. True success is not measured by wealth alone, but by resilience, compassion, and the ability to uplift others. Leadership thrives when guided by fairness and purpose rather than ego. Rebuilding one's life after pain requires courage, self-belief, and a focus on meaningful connections. It's okay to feel fear or doubt, but growth calm lances itself. Those who persevere with grace often find fulfillment beyond measure. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, share with friends, and comment your perspectives or lessons learned.